Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to talk about books that I have recently read off of Kindle Unlimited that I have just been absolutely obsessed with. If you don't know what Kindle Unlimited is, I will leave a link down below that will give you some information, but basically this is a subscription service that you can get from Amazon. And I am just so happy that I finally took the plunge and got this service a little over a year ago at this point. And I haven't done one of these videos since April, so there's quite a few books on this list, but these are all books that I read off of Kindle Unlimited that I have given 5 stars. So let's just go ahead and jump right on into it. So first up, we have Big Boxer by Cassie Mint. I did bring this book up recently in an underrated contemporary romance video that I did, so I will link that up in the cards above. But this is a romance between Lucas, who is a boxer. He's getting into the later part of his career for sure. And then we have Beck, our heroine, and she's plus size, which is one of the things that I loved about this novella. But she is also a sports writer, and so she writes a review basically about this recent fight that Lucas was a part of, and she notices that Lucas has seemed to kind of lose his spark and he's just not the fighter that he used to be, and so she's very honest about that in the review. He finds out, he tracks her down and confronts her about it, but they have this instant connection. And yeah, this one is just really great. It's not one that I hear a lot of people talk about, even people that are really big fans of Cassie Mint, so I wanted to bring this one up for sure. Next up, we have 2 books by Sophie Lark that I absolutely adore, and I am just so happy that Sophie Lark has all of her books on Kindle Unlimited. But that is Broken Heart and Bloody Heart and Broken Vows, books 4 and 5 in her Brutal Birthright series, which is a mafia romance series. And so Bloody Heart, I'll talk about this one briefly. First of all, it uses the secret baby trope, which is a trope that I usually kind of hate, but this book does it really well. But this is about Dante and Simone. This is a second chance romance. So 9 years before the bulk of the story, they met when they were about 18 years old, if I'm not mistaken. They quickly fell in love, and then they are separated because of reasons. And so over the 9 years, we see Simone raising their son and Dante going on with his life. He has no idea that he has a son, and so they come back into each other's lives again because of reasons, and so he eventually does find out that he has a son. And this was just amazing. So much angst. So well done. Absolutely love this one. And then Broken Vow is absolutely my favorite book of the Brutal Birthright series, and I think a lot of us are in agreement with that. We have Riona Griffin and we have Raylan. This is a grumpy heroine, sunshiny hero trope, which is one of my favorite tropes ever. And so basically someone is after Riona trying to kill her, and so Raylan ends up being her bodyguard, and they eventually end up going to live with his family out in the country to keep her safe. And this is just incredible. I mean, there are sex scenes in particular from this book that live in my head rent-free because that's how incredible and amazing they were, but also just the romance between these two, like their characters, like everything I'm just obsessed with. So I could absolutely go on and on about these 2 books, but I highly recommend this series as a whole, especially if you have Kindle Unlimited. Like you have no excuse. Please go ahead and read these books. Next up, we have Nobody's Duke by Scarlett Scott. I'm also going to talk about the second book of this League of Dukes series, but I always get so excited when I find a historical romance author on Kindle Unlimited. But this one, you need to read this book, guys, if you read Again the Magic by Lisa Kleypas and loved that book, because this romance absolutely gives me vibes of that one. We have Era and Clay, our 2 main characters. This is a class difference romance. Era is a part of a family that is of nobility, and Clay definitely isn't. I can't remember. I think his family is just working class basically, and so they fall for each other when they're about 18 years old. They make a plan to run away and get married, but things get in the way of that, and so they end up both feeling betrayed by the other, and they are just like incredibly angry at each other. So they haven't seen each other in like 8 years, something like that. But Clay comes back into Era's life because she's now a duchess, but her husband was murdered by this radical group. And so Clay now has to be her bodyguard to make sure that this group doesn't come back to kill her and her son, who is the heir to the dukedom. And so they realize that they never stopped loving each other, but they're both, like I said, they're just incredibly angry at each other. And, you know, it's just a really wonderful romance to see the two of them go from this hatred to this just passionate love. And there's some great steamy scenes in this as well. And moving on to book 2 of this series, which is Heartless Duke. This one is about Leo and Bridget, and what's really cool is that Bridget, our heroine, was kind of the villain at the end of Nobody's Duke. And now our hero, Leo, he is also part of this League of Dukes. It's basically a spy kind of organization, I think would be the best way to describe it. But Leo takes Bridget as his captive to try to interrogate her about this radical group that she is a part of, and she is giving up nothing. And they just realize that they have this attraction and chemistry with each other that they just can't help but give into. And there's just some really hot scenes in this. One of the things I really loved about this book is that throughout the story, Leo calls Bridget Banshee, and at first that's an insult, but as the story goes along, it turns into a term of endearment. I love that in romance novels, especially, you know, like enemies to lovers romances like this clearly is. So yes, highly recommend this one as well. Next up, I have a couple more Cassie Mint novellas that I absolutely love, and I feel like no one has read them. But the first one is Woke Up Wed. This one is about Effie and Guy. They end up getting married in Vegas. They wake up the next morning having no clue what happened the night before. And so most of this novella is them like retracing their steps of the night before, like how exactly did they come to be married, you know? It's just really adorable. There's some really great steamy scenes, of course. This is Cassie Mint we're talking about. Like, yeah, this was just such a fun time. And then another novella in this same series is Runaway Bride. Now this one is between Leo, who is a mafioso, and Mia, who is a mafia princess. And so at the very beginning of the novella, she has been put into this arranged marriage to Leo's brother. But Leo wants Mia for himself. And so he literally kills his own brother so that he can have Mia. And Mia freaks out. She does not want to be married in the first place, especially not to a mafioso. So she runs away. And so it's this game of cat and mouse. He's trying to find her, and he will go to the ends of the earth to have her. And it's a good time. So fun. Next up, we have Nerdgasm by Kimberly Reese. I love this novella so much. This is the novella you need to read if you are into, you know, the sweet cinnamon roll hero. And we also have a virgin hero going on. Theo just needs to be protected at all costs. And it's his romance with Allie. He is the TA in a college course that she's taking. So there's like a little bit of like a forbidden aspect in that way, I guess, but it's really not that much of an issue. But this was just everything, mainly because Theo, like I said, like I love this man with my whole heart, and he's not even real, and I'm sad about it. And yeah, I will say there's parts of this novella that are pretty bonkers, like just suspend your disbelief for those parts, but like overall, this was just such a fantastic romance novella. Next up, we have two of my absolute favorite romance novels that I have read this year. So that is going to be Unhinged and Psycho, both by Onley James. This is books 1 and 2 of her Necessary Evils series. And I loved both of these pretty equally. I will say I think I liked Psycho just a little bit more, but wow, my love and obsession for these stories like truly knows no bounds. But basically we have the Mulvaney brothers. This is a found family kind of story because we have Thomas Mulvaney, who is a psychiatrist or like a scientist of some kind, and he adopts these young boys that are all psychopaths and or sociopaths, and he raises them to be vigilante serial killers. And so these are serial killer romances, yet they're very sweet and wholesome somehow. And like I said, the found family aspect is everything. I feel like there's like a little bit of something for everyone in these stories. Like they're just incredible. And this is definitely a series that I've been savoring because as much as I'm dying to read book 3, like there's only so many books in this series, you know? So I'm trying to like not binge them all at once, but I'm very excited to continue for sure. Next up, we have Not My Type by Evie Mitchell. This is book 1 in her all access series. And this one specifically is about Frankie. She is a wheelchair user. She also runs this podcast where it's basically all about accessibility, specifically like making sex accessible from what I can remember. And so one of her listeners requests that she does an episode about shibari, which is the art of rope tying, specifically in BDSM. She has no experience in that at all, and so she contacts like a mutual friend of hers, whose name is Jay. He works at a local BDSM sex club and he is an expert in shibari. And so that's how the two of them meet, and there's this instant chemistry between the two of them. I love that Jay is like a flirtatious and irreverent kind of hero, but of course that's a facade. And I just loved the vibe between these two characters. This is a pretty short story. It's only like a 5-hour audiobook, you know, it's a novella for sure. And I know that some people wanted this book to be longer, but for me personally, I feel like the novella length really worked. There's some really great steamy scenes in this as well. Yeah, just like a really good time, and I loved the disability representation as well. Next up, we have Barbarian's Redemption by Ruby Dixon. This is book 13 in her Ice Planet Barbarian series. So this is a book that I would only recommend if you're going to commit yourself to the series as a whole. Like you can't read this as a standalone. I think you'd be very confused. But this one truly stepped things up. You know, every other book of this series I've given 4 stars. Like they're just really fun alien romances, but this one just has a really wonderful redemption story for our hero, Beck. And I just love the romance between Beck and Ellie. I just thought it was wonderful. There's a lot of interesting discussions brought up about things like slavery, because Ellie was a slave for like, I think most of her life, if I'm not mistaken. She was kidnapped by these aliens. She's just been a slave like for a very long time. So there's discussions about that. And yeah, it's a wonderful story. Highly recommend it if you are interested in alien romances. Next up, we have That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. Oh my God, this book, you guys, I did not expect to love this as much as I did. I knew it was gonna be funny. I mean, you can tell just by the title alone, right, that it's gonna be a good time. I also really love the cover of these novellas. I need to read book 2 ASAP. This would also be a wonderful novella to read for the fall season. It just has a really nice, like, cozy fantasy vibe to it. Like I said, it's really funny because we have Cinnamon Hot Pepper, our heroine. She is absolutely hysterical. And so she gets drunk one night and she does end up saving this demon named Fallon. And so they end up going on this quest essentially, and it's their romance. It's such a good time. This is also a novella. I think it's about like 170 pages, something like that. I think you'll absolutely fly through it and have a good time. Some really great steamy scenes, of course. I love the chemistry between Cinnamon and Fallon. It's just, yeah, it's just a really fun fantasy romance for sure. Next up, we have Always Been You by QB Tyler. This is a book that quite surprised me as well. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did, but I read this specifically for a reading vlog where I was reading some of McKay's favorite romances from the channel Oh Hey It's McKay. So I'm gonna link that vlog up in the cards above if you are interested. But I think this was my favorite book that I read for that vlog. And this is a step-sibling romance. I know that not everybody loves that trope. I understand, but it works for me for some reason, and we're not going to talk about why. But this is about Gabby and James. They, like I said, they are step-siblings. They grew up together. Gabby was adopted when she was 2 years old. So she has lived her entire life, you know, with James in her life. And so there is a significant age gap. This starts when she's 18 and he's 30. And so, yeah, there's definitely a taboo and forbidden element to it. However, James can get it any day of the week. And like, yeah, he's one of the hottest heroes ever. And I just was obsessed and addicted to their relationship and the steamy scenes, and like, this just worked so well for me. Next up, we have a couple books that I'm gonna quickly mention because I read these during the Romance Takeover Readathon, so I'm gonna link that vlog up in the cards above. I discussed all three of these books in depth quite a bit in that vlog, but the first one is Blindside by Candy Steiner. This is a wonderful sports, new adult, fake dating romance. There's also sex lessons involved between our two main characters, Gianna and Clay. This is just everything that I wanted. This perfectly met my expectations. I love this book so much. And now that I'm thinking about it, I need to buy myself a physical copy because that's how much I loved this romance. And one of the things I love so much about this book is that I equally love the hero and heroine. Like Gianna, I love the way that she was just so sweet and she swept Clay off his feet and vice versa. But yeah, like, this is just such an iconic romance for sure. Next up, we have Bright Like Wildfire by Juliet Cross. I've been talking about this book a lot recently, so I'm not gonna say too much except that this is a small town romance between Betty and Bennett. And it's kind of like a frenemies to lovers vibe going on. We also have a grumpy heroine, kind of sunshiny hero. And I just connected with this book so much because Betty and Bennett are leads in a community theater play together. And so that is a lot of the focus of this story. And it's just, it's wonderful and it's sexy. Like, Juliet Cross, man, like, there is something about Juliet Cross's writing and her stories that I just vibe with. Like, they are all bangers. Like, there's only one book of hers that I've read that I didn't give 5 stars, but I still really enjoyed it. But for the most part, I have just been absolutely obsessed with everything that I have read by her. And then the third book that I'm gonna bring up from that vlog was Behind the Bars by Brittany C. Cherry. Y'all, this book broke me, completely shattered my heart. Shattered it and put it back together. I feel like with Brittany C. Cherry, you have to be in the mood to go into her books because they're all very emotional. I've read 2 of her books at this point, but they're very emotional. There's some dark elements to them. You know, the hero and heroine go through a journey, my goodness, to get to their happily ever after, especially in this book. I also read The Gravity of Us, but this book in particular, oh man, the hero in particular, he goes through it. So this is about Eli and Jasmine. This takes place in New Orleans, by the way, which I'm just absolutely obsessed with. This starts when they're in high school and they start falling for each other, but they end up being separated, and so they come back together years later when Jasmine comes back to New Orleans, and it turns out that Eli is like a completely different person. He is now very cold and very guarded, and so we see the reasoning behind that. And I do want to point out there is a content warning for loss of a loved one, as well as a kind of violent death on page. So just be warned, this book definitely goes there at some points, but this is a stunning and beautiful romance. And if I let myself, I will talk about this for years and years, but I need to shut myself up. I just highly recommend it. Do not be surprised if this ends up being one of my favorite contemporary romances of the year. It's absolutely spectacular. And every time I think about this book, I'm just reminded of how much I need to read more from Brittany Cherry. Like, nobody writes romances quite like her. So I actually just have one book left that I want to talk about. That is Finding Eden by Mia Sheridan. So this is the second part of a romance duet. The first book was Becoming Calder, and I did really like that book, but I gave that book 4 stars. This one, however, was hands down a 5-star read for me. I loved this book so much. But the basic story, we have Calder and Eden. They were essentially raised in this cult community, and so in this book we're seeing the aftermath of them after the downfall of that community, basically, and how they have found their way back to each other. Their romance is truly like soulmate level, It is absolutely stunning. I loved the direction the plot of this book went in particular. The pacing for me was a lot better than book one as well. Like, it's so well done. And Mia Sheridan is another author that I absolutely need to read more from. So I highly recommend this little duet for sure if you're looking for a darker, you know, cult kind of romance. So that is going to be it for this Kindle Unlimited favorites video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of these books, or if you want to give me some of your KU recommendations. I'm always looking to add to my Kindle Unlimited TBR. So I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!